Imagine a banquet hall packed with gods, each one brimming with unstoppable power. Now picture mortals, tiny and fragile, daring to defy them. You'd expect some stern punishment, right? But in many myths, the gods didn't just hand down discipline. They unleashed horrors, unspeakable, relentless torment. They went too far. Today we're diving into 7 of the darkest divine punishments ever recorded. Let's tear right in. 1. Tantalus, the father who betrayed. Tantalus was no common mortal. He was once a cherished dinner guest of the Olympians themselves, a rare privilege. Picture him leaning across the table, swapping jokes with Zeus, sampling ambrosia and nectar, living that surreal dream of brushing shoulders with immortals. But beneath that pleasant exterior, his arrogance festered. He wanted to test the gods' all-seeing nature, so he committed an atrocity that still stuns mythologists. He killed his own son, Pelops, cooked him, and served him to the gods to see if they'd notice. A horrifying act meant to mock their supposed omniscience. Some versions say only Demeter, distracted by grief, took a bite. Others insist none of the gods fell for Tantalus's trick. Either way, the gods saw through his crime. The retribution was swift and savage. They resurrected Pelops, restored him, and banished Tantalus to the underworld. His punishment: eternal hunger and thirst, immersed in a pool of cool water he could never drink, and surrounded by fruit-laden branches he could never reach. The moment he tried, the water receded or the branches blew away. It was pure psychological torment, unrelenting frustration every second of eternity. The broader implication? You do not challenge divine authority with twisted games. The gods wanted everyone to witness Tantalus's plight and think twice before betraying the cosmic order. Imagine Tantalus's anguish. Each time water lapped his ankles, it beckoned him to hope. Each time he reached for fruit, he believed he might taste sweetness again. Over and over, he tasted defeat instead. The cycle never stopped, hammering home the lesson: to scorn divine power leads only to torment. 2. Prometheus, the fire-bringer. Prometheus, a titan with a soft spot for humanity, changed our world forever by giving us fire. He felt humans deserved a fighting chance. To him, it wasn't just about warmth. Fire represented knowledge, progress, the potential to rise above mere survival. But Zeus saw it differently. He believed mortals should remain weak and dependent on the gods. Prometheus's gift threatened that balance. When Zeus discovered the theft of fire, he erupted in fury. "How dare you defy me for these frail creatures?" he is said to have roared. Prometheus was seized, dragged to the Caucasus Mountains, and chained to a crag. For good measure, each day an eagle, Zeus's emblem of vengeance, descended to tear out Prometheus's liver. Every night, that liver regenerated, only to be torn out again. It was an agonizing cycle of eternal mutilation. The bigger consequence here was the gods' stance on human empowerment. By punishing Prometheus so severely, Zeus drew a line. If any other immortal tried to uplift humanity without divine approval, they'd face unimaginable horror. Still, Prometheus's legacy lingered. Humans retained fire, and with it they learned to shape their destiny. But from Zeus's vantage point, the Titans' rebellion had to be stifled, and stifled it was, under grinding, daily torture. Prometheus's internal conflict was stark. He cared about mortals so much that he accepted eternal torment on their behalf. Some myths suggest Heracles eventually freed him, but the scars of that daily torment never faded. For eons, Prometheus remained the ultimate reminder. Any gift from gods to humans, if stolen, demands a dreadful price. 3. Ixion, lost in a burning wheel. Ixion started off as a mortal king who violated sacred laws of hospitality. He murdered his own father-in-law. Zeus, in a surprising moment of mercy, invited Ixion to Olympus to find redemption. Now imagine standing among the Olympians, a second chance laid at your feet. Yet Ixion repaid that kindness with betrayal. He desired Hera, Zeus's wife, and tried to seduce her. Some myths say he boasted about it afterward. This time, Zeus lured Ixion into revealing his lust by sending a cloud shaped like Hera. Ixion took the bait. When the truth came out, the thunder of Zeus's wrath was immediate. Zeus bound Ixion to a fiery winged wheel that spun perpetually across the heavens. The grinding, scalding wheel never ceased, condemning Ixion to eternal pain and ceaseless motion. The moral stakes here were colossal. Hospitality was a sacred bond, xenia in Greek culture, and Zeus was its cosmic protector. If the highest god offered you redemption and you spat in his face, you tore the moral fabric that held society together. Thus, Ixion's incessant spinning through the sky symbolized how far from stability a mortal could fall when gratitude and honor were tossed aside. Ixion's punishment was more than physical torment. It was social and cosmic isolation. He spun alone, exiled from gods and mortals alike, all because he chose lust, boasting and violence over humility and gratitude. 4. Sisyphus, the endless boulder. Sisyphus was cunning, a smooth-tongued trickster king who cheated death not once but twice. Rumor says he waylaid travelers to his city, but what sealed his fate was how brazenly he crossed the gods. In one version, he chained Thanatos, the personification of death, so that no one could die. In another, he tricked Persephone into letting him return to the living. Each time, he displayed nerve that turned the cosmic order on its head. Finally, the gods had enough. They chose a fate that matched his arrogance. He was condemned to roll a massive boulder up a steep hill in the underworld. Each time he approached the summit, the rock slipped from his grasp, thundering back down. His effort? Nullified. His progress? Wiped out. The next day, the ordeal began anew. It's the ultimate symbol of futile labor. The punishment hammered home a grand warning: cheat the system, and you'll be locked in a cycle of frustration forever. On a deeper level, it revealed the gods' iron grip on life and death. No mortal, no matter how wily, could permanently sidestep that cosmic balance without facing unimaginable retribution. Sisyphus's mental state must have been utter despair. He was brilliant enough to outsmart immortals, yet ended up repeating the same agonizing task. For some, it's a metaphor for meaningless tasks in life. For the gods, it was a lethal example. You do not unshackle death or toy with the underworld's process. 5. Fenrir, bound by a godly chain. Fenrir was a gigantic wolf, son of the trickster god Loki. The Norse gods, or Aesir, discovered that Fenrir was prophesied to bring devastation during Ragnarok, the apocalypse that would end their world. From the moment Fenrir was born, dread pulsed through the halls of Asgard. The gods watched him grow bigger, stronger, more ferocious, and the prophecies grew louder. Fear led them to design a cunning plan. They pretended it was a game to test Fenrir's might. First, they forged mighty chains to restrain him. He snapped those like twigs. Then they commissioned the dwarves to craft Gleipnir, a magical ribbon woven from impossible ingredients, the sound of a cat's footfall, the breath of a fish, the beard of a woman. Gleipnir looked delicate but carried supernatural strength. When the gods approached Fenrir with this ribbon, Fenrir grew suspicious. "I sense deceit," he snarled. He demanded that one of the Aesir place a hand in his jaws as a gesture of trust. The brave god Tyr volunteered. As soon as Fenrir realized he couldn't break free, he bit off Tyr's hand in rage. Bound and muzzled, Fenrir was left in captivity until Ragnarok, when he'd eventually break loose. Fenrir's punishment was terrifying because it was born from panic and prophecy. The gods, in their dread of the future, inflicted a preemptive imprisonment. They took away Fenrir's freedom before he even caused harm. Yes, the prophecy said he would cause catastrophe, but in binding him early, the Aesir unleashed his fury. His internal rage only grew. Some might say that by punishing Fenrir in this way, they guaranteed the very disaster they hoped to prevent. 6. Loki, tied with the entrails of his son. Loki, the clever shapeshifter, orchestrated countless mischiefs. He caused Baldur's death by tricking the blind god Herder into throwing mistletoe, an object all other beings had sworn not to harm Baldur. That final act shattered the trust between Loki and the other gods. Baldur was beloved, a beacon of joy and light. When he perished, gloom seized Asgard. Then Hel, Loki's daughter, refused to free Baldur's spirit. The Aesir demanded retribution. They hunted Loki, who fled in disguise. They cornered him in a cave. And there they inflicted a punishment that still sends chills down the spine. They used the entrails of Loki's own son, Vali, transformed into a wolf that killed his brother Narfi, to bind Loki to a trio of rocks. The gruesomeness was deliberate. The gods wanted Loki to feel the weight of what he had done. Then a serpent was placed above his head. It dripped venom onto his face, causing him excruciating pain. Only his devoted wife, Sigyn, could offer momentary relief by catching the venom in a bowl. But whenever she had to empty it, the venom fell on Loki's face again, and his writhing shook the very earth. The broader consequence of Loki's punishment ties back to Ragnarok. The prophecy said that Loki would break free and lead the forces of chaos. By imprisoning him, the Aesir preserved their immediate peace at the expense of stoking his vengeance. Loki's torment festered, ensuring that when he did break free, his fury would be unstoppable. The tragedy: Baldur's death might have been reversed if a certain set of conditions were met, but Loki's meddling made it impossible. Now, with Loki bound and Baldur gone, doom hung over Asgard like a storm cloud, all because of a trickster's grin. 7. Sekhmet's rampage. The Egyptian near annihilation. In ancient Egypt, the sun god Ra once grew enraged at the corruption of humanity. The people, or so the story goes, plotted against him. Furious, Ra decided to unleash a force of divine wrath. He created Sekhmet, a lioness-headed goddess with a thirst for bloodshed. She was unstoppable, tearing through mankind with savage abandon. This was no surgical strike. It was a near-extinction event. Sekhmet embodied Ra's fury to such an extreme that she couldn't stop killing. The desert sands ran with carnage as she almost wiped humanity from existence. The gods realized the punishment had gone too far. They recognized that if Sekhmet continued, there would be nobody left to worship or maintain Ma'at, the principle of cosmic balance. Terrified, Ra came up with a final ploy. He had vast quantities of beer dyed red to resemble blood. Sekhmet, in her bloodlust, drank it all, grew intoxicated, and passed out. When she awoke, her destructive fury had subsided, and she transformed into the gentler Hathor in many renditions. The stakes? Cataclysmic. The entire human race hung by a thread. Ra's punishment was so extreme that even he had to intervene to save his own creation. And in the eyes of Egyptian mythology, if humans ceased to exist, the cosmic order would eventually crumble. No one would uphold the daily rituals that sustained the gods. Ra took a gamble, and it almost annihilated the entire world. Sekhmet's unstoppable rage serves as a grim reminder. Once a god's wrath is unleashed, it's perilously difficult to rein in. Even the deity who commanded her was forced to scramble for a solution. For mortals, it was an event they never forgot. Humans realized they lived at the mercy of powers that might not always act with measured justice. Sometimes it was raw fury, unleashed without mercy. A mortal defies the gods. A city stands on the brink. An entire world teeters, all under the wrath of immortal forces. Even a single misstep can trigger eternal curses or near-apocalyptic events. Some might call it cruel, others might call it cosmic justice. Either way, these punishments echo through time, and sometimes that echo grows louder.